Scaramucci just reported about the fundraising gap between the ex-president and President Joe Biden was something that would bother Trump before. It's about to get a lot worse because later today, President Joe Biden is holding what his campaign is already calling the most successful political fundraiser in American history. This star-studded event is expected to raise $25 million. It will bring together former Presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, as well as late-night host Stephen Colbert. The expected amount of $25 million is more than half of the $44.8 million that Trump and the RNC currently have in the bank. Joining us at the table, national co-chair for President Biden's 2024 campaign, Mitch Landrieu. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
We have to do a New Orleans segment down the road, but because I want to talk about the president today. And I know he knows, and you know, that it isn't just money, but money makes a lot of things easier in terms of message. And he seems to have landed on this message at the State of the Union of really trying to broaden the coalition, quoting Ronald Reagan, saying that it almost feels like soul of the nation has taken another step and that this campaign is about saving our democracy, protecting U.S. interests at home. Tell me what resonates the most for you.
Well, what's so critically important to remember is that elections are about choices. It's about the past versus the future. It's about values, and it's critically important. When President Biden ran for office, he said, I'm going to help restore the soul of the nation. I'm going to invest in the American people. I'm going to lower costs. I'm going to impact people's freedoms. And he's bringing the receipts. So as you look at the choice, so in November, the choice is going to be Donald Trump, who basically thinks about himself and seeks revenge and retribution, as your previous panel talked about, or Joe Biden, who lifts people up, brings people together, and includes people. And fundraisers and raising money is really an indication of how you're doing with that. So if you look at the split screen today, President Obama, President Biden, President Clinton, Vice President, presidents are going to be together raising money. So let's just stop on that, because one thing you don't see is Donald Trump raising money with his vice president, who during the insurrection had people that he called to the Capitol calling for the death of his vice president, and he never came to the aid. And that vice president, amazingly, never happened in the history of the country, has now said to the people of America, I can't vote for that guy. Liz Cheney, of course, who is a daughter of Vice President Cheney, and in her own right has been a spectacular person and a Republican, has said, listen, Joe Biden's right about democracy. And so this really isn't about conservatives and liberals, Democrats or Republicans anymore. This is literally about saving our democracy and saving our freedoms. And if you don't have the institutions, the things that the founding fathers thought is the secret sauce of what America makes America great, then you literally cannot have a country. And when you have 17 cabinet members that work for you, who secretaries of defense, chiefs of staff, people that lost sons and daughters in wars, come out and say, I'll work with that guy, don't be for him again, all of a sudden, you know, the bells have to go off. And so President Biden is going to speak to that. He also has an incredible record to run on. And think about this, $25 million, it's the largest fundraiser in the history of American politics. While Donald Trump can't hardly raise any money, the RNC is laying people off. Donald Trump is kind of in his basement on his knees looking under his sofa for a quarter to make bond with. You know, there's a real clear choice here. And I think the American people are going to step up to the plate and do the right thing.
Let me ask you a structural question. I mean, when you're an incumbent, and again, let's stipulate that perhaps everything that I knew about politics is inoperative. But it used to be that when you were an incumbent, it needed to be a choice. It couldn't be just a referendum. It feels like not only is this a contrast election between Trump and Biden, but Trump, and then Anthony Scaramucci, who worked for him for a bit, described him as a narcissist. He won't let it be a referendum on Biden. He needs everything to be about him. So as a structural matter, how does Trump's demand for attention and demand to frame, like, how does that aid the Biden efforts to make sure that the choice is in front of voters?
Well, first of all, bring it on. Happy to talk about how horrible Donald Trump is as a human being. If you think about his entire life, just think about it simply like this. Whether it's in his personal life, in his business life, in his public life, Donald Trump has used his power to help himself and to hurt and abuse everybody else. So, you know, we joke a little bit about him looking for a quarter to make his bond, but don't forget why he has to make bond. He has to make bond because 2 courts have already found that he was a sexual abuser, a defamer, and a business fraud. And that's before you get to the other criminal cases. But here's the thing. The American people have to make this determination. They're the jury. And we have to decide what kind of country we want to be. And the choice could not be clearer in terms of what the values of America are. I agree with Anthony Scaramucci that at the end of the day, this is going to be hard. It's going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight. We are not bringing a knife to this gunfight. That's not happening this time. But I think the American people are going to show up because they know what is on the line. And if you're listening to Liz Cheney and Charlie Kirk and the Republicans who Ronald Reagan, George Bush, rock-rigged Republicans who are now saying the fate of our democracy, the fate of our children's ability to live in a free world is on the line, I think people are going to stand up and be counted this time. And the president, President Biden, on top of that, has an incredible record to run on. 15.5 million jobs, lowest unemployment rate. I mean, stock market at 4 all-time high. Understanding that people are still under intense financial pressure, and we're in a world of uncertainty, and we need to bring stability to that and calm. Here's one thing that people don't pay much attention to. Only one cabinet member for Joe Biden left because they got a better job. The rest of them are there, and day to day, the government has been working and in function, and nobody's waking up like you did during Trump going, what the hell did that guy do today that I have to be worried about or embarrassed about? And I think people are going to understand that, know that going forward.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.